Yeah, this is a new Amazon Prime documentary. I believe, I don't know if it's still going forward with its theatrical release, but it's going to be hitting the site pretty soon. And
It did come out in limited theatrical release on the 9th, so a few days ago. So it's coinciding.
yeah, I mean, I said I wasn't sure because I know the local release, I guess it was supposed to get some theatrical release here. And then I got an email a couple days afterwards that said it wasn't coming to theaters in this area, but I wasn't sure if that was like a national thing or if that was just locally. But in any case, this is a documentary about voter suppression, which is something that's also very timely this year.
Ah, perfect.
So I think you might have teed that one up already, but in case that point hasn't been made very clear with this episode, we're talking about a lot of timely and political things. So if you're still listening, good on you. In any case, yeah. So this movie, it comes from two filmmakers, Liz Garbus and Lisa Cortez, and it's primarily following Stacey Abrams, who I believe is she was in Georgia, a Georgia politician.
Yeah, she was running for the Georgia governorship, and she lost to I think George Kemp is his name.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and it was a very close race, and then she eventually really didn't concede with that, or at least like it took a while before she did. I don't exactly know for sure, but
Yeah, and to set the stage a little bit in case listeners don't
yeah.
know, it was actually very recent that we found out that under Kemp, who was sort of running the legislature for this election, I think hundreds of thousands of voters were purged from the rolls, and she only lost by something like 50,000 votes. So that's like a recent thing that just came out, that the voter suppression in that state is pretty undeniable at this point.
Yeah, so it tees off with that introduction, like a very recent thing that happened where it's very clear that voter suppression has been going on throughout the nation of late, including in the 2016 election to a certain extent as well. But this documentary, for the most part, it goes back in time throughout our nation's history and just explores how this has happened, primarily to poor and disenfranchised people of color as well, and how this has been a prevalent problem throughout the nation. This isn't just something that's been a talking point throughout the last few years. It's something that's been going on, building up for a while, and now people are becoming more aware of it and becoming more vocal of it, especially with social media. And then this case with Stacey Abrams has also really brought that to the forefront. And the documentary itself, I mean, for the most part, it's another documentary where it's like people sitting down in rooms and talking about stuff. So I imagine this movie may not be something that's going to like hit a audience that's like off on a Friday night and just want to like watch something fun and relaxing. I do think this is going to be a type of film where, like, if you are interested in this thing, you're going to watch it. If you're not really interested in this thing, you may be, not willing to watch it, or maybe like, put it off, which is unfortunate because I think this movie, if you pretty much know all this stuff, I don't think you're going to learn anything particularly new about this process. But if you are someone who is like maybe a little bit more like unaware, or like maybe closer to center and not fully aware of the extent of how long this has been going on for, and like some of the details about this. I guess I was somewhere in between where it's like I knew about voter suppression, and I knew that this has been a problem throughout history, especially in our recent history, but I did know the full extent of some of the details, and it was very informative. And I think it's done in a way that's pretty presentable and matter of fact without losing like, I don't know if entertainment value is the correct word here, but like it is a very engaging film in that sense. Like it does keep you involved, and even when it does kind of feel like a history lesson, the film itself does a lot of with like animation and editing, I think, in a way that keeps your interest involved throughout. Now, I don't think the film itself is particularly like amazing as far as its approach. I think it's more accessible than anything. Like I think the fact that it exists is probably the like uphill battle, I think, in that like it does have a streaming service that's going to play it for a pretty broad audience. And I think the fact that it is available and might inform people about this is like the battle more than the fact that if it's good or bad. But I do think, as a film that is timely, it is pretty well presented. And I do think Stacey Abrams is a pretty engaging central figure in this, who does break it down in a pretty straightforward and ultimately pretty engaging way. I think in that sense, it does work. I don't think it's something that's like going to be a like amazing tour de force for the documentary genre, and I don't know if it's going to be as accessible after this election, because it's very much centered around this election and based on things that are happening very much right now. So I don't know what the shelf life of this movie is going to look like, even though I do feel like voter suppression is going to be a prevalent problem throughout our history, unfortunately, and our present and our future. But yeah, as far as the movie itself, I mean, it's a good solid like B minus documentary. Like I think what it's saying is more important than like how it's done, which I think is just more fine than good. But I do think ultimately it is a worthwhile watch, and for that, I think a pretty solid B minus is a good grade for it.
That's a B minus for All In, The Fight for Democracy. It's on Prime Video right now. This documentary sounds like it's of a piece with Slay the Dragon, which is the gerrymandering documentary that touches upon voter suppression. But yeah, it sounds
Yeah,
like these are two films that kind of go together a little bit. If you want a full picture of voter suppression in terms of how states are gerrymandered to disenfranchise the vote in certain counties, then this film kind of gets into the other side of it, where the actual polls or the actual voters themselves are going through other tactics that are keeping them from getting their right to vote out there. So I would definitely kick in that documentary as well. Maybe if any listeners check out All In, you might want to check out Slay the Dragon right after.
yeah. I mean, gerrymandering does come up, but not as much as I imagine it does in that documentary. But yeah, I would say that they. I mean, I haven't seen
Yeah.
Slay the Dragon, but I imagine they do go hand in hand pretty well.
Yeah. Like I said, I think Slay the Dragon is the inverse, where it's mostly about gerrymandering, but then it gets into the voter suppression stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing, that it sounded like those two would go together really well. And I quite liked Slay the Dragon. So I imagine if you wanted to have like a pro democratic process double feature, that you could do a lot worse. That sounds like a pretty fun time.
Yeah. And I will say about this film, just because we have been fairly political, I mean, even though this documentary is fairly left leaning, I do think it's more accessible maybe than I might suggest, in that, like, I think it's just addressing that this is a problem throughout like the nation, no matter like what side you are. Like voting is an essential right
Yeah.
for Americans. So I think, if you're worried it's going to be like too left leaning and stuff, I would say still check it out anyway. I think it's pretty accessible for both political parties, but just something to keep in mind.
I agree totally. I think that in terms of like voting, I think it is a bipartisan thing, or like the solution should be bipartisan. I think we should all be on the same side of making sure that people should be able to vote and the vote should be protected. And that is a fundamental thing about this country. I hate that it's been so politicized, but that's kind of where we're at. So